An ordinary evening at one of the most prestigious schools right in the centre of Sydney. But close to midnight, police arrived at the toilet block in the school's gymnasium after receiving a 000 call. There, they found the body of a young woman in her early 20s. But the head injuries were so severe that, when she was found, her face was almost unrecognizable. Her death was immediately classified as a murder. Security camera footage later revealed something far more disturbing. The attacker had gone to a hardware store, carefully weighing up different hammers before choosing one. He had also stood in front of that very toilet block, practicing a charging motion over and over to make sure everything would go exactly to plan. This was a premeditated attack, not a moment of lost control or emotional chaos. The question arose immediately. How could the killer have prepared so meticulously just to murder a young woman in the very place she worked and loved every day? So who was the killer, and what was the motive for targeting the victim? What was the relationship between the killer and the victim that could lead to such a devastating tragedy? So what, in the end, became the motive that drove him to act with such brutality? Right after confirming this was a murder, New South Wales Police immediately began reviewing the school's entire security camera system. This was the first, and most important, source of information for establishing what had happened in the gymnasium area before the victim was found. What appeared on the screen left investigators shaken. The cameras captured footage of a man driving a car to the school grounds on the very day the incident occurred. The footage showed this man going to a hardware store and picking up hammer after hammer, appearing to weigh them in his hand before selecting one that suited him. Another clip showed the same man standing outside a toilet block, repeating a charging motion into a room with the hammer raised in different hand positions. He was also recorded placing a "cleaning in progress" sign in front of another toilet door, a deliberate setup designed to guide the victim into the exact room he had chosen beforehand. More significantly, the cameras showed this same man following closely behind the victim, right before she walked into the toilet where she was killed. And a short time later, only the man was seen walking back out. The cameras never captured the victim walking out after that point. From this footage, police established that this was the person they needed to find. Someone who, although not yet formally identified at that moment, gave them information that would make the rest of the investigation far easier. For investigators, this was no longer a theory. This was direct visual evidence, showing a plan that had been carefully prepared, step by step, over many hours before the killer struck. Meanwhile, the man identified as the central focus of the investigation had disappeared. He had left the scene after the incident, and it was unknown where he had gone or what he had done afterward. Police quickly treated this as a deeply concerning disappearance and launched a large-scale search, not only to support the investigation, but also out of concern for the man's own safety. His last known trace was located in a coastal area, more than 10 kilometers from the original crime scene, a region known for its steep cliffs overlooking the ocean. The investigation, from a single homicide, now expanded into two parallel fronts, tracing the cause and sequence of the murder and tracking down the man who had vanished immediately afterward. They began questioning people around the school, from teachers and staff to anyone who may have seen the man in the hours beforehand. At the same time, investigators continued gathering more data, expanding the review of security cameras in nearby areas, trying to reconstruct his movements after leaving the school. But for a period of time, none of these efforts produced any results. No camera captured which direction he had gone. No one among those questioned could offer any further information about where he might be. While the search for the man was still underway, the examination of the crime scene continued in parallel. The toilet block in the gymnasium was completely sealed off. The forensic team and crime scene examiners continued working for many hours straight to collect every remaining trace of evidence at the scene. Forensic pathologists confirmed the cause of death was multiple severe injuries from a hard object, striking the head and neck area. The level of injury was so severe that direct facial identification was not possible right away. For that reason, victim identification had to be carried out through another method. Around mid-morning the next day, a family friend of the victim came forward to confirm her identity. Through this, police officially confirmed the woman found was Lilie James, 21, a young staff member at the school and a water polo coach familiar to many students and colleagues there. Alongside this, the crime scene examination continued to expand. Investigators did not find the murder weapon at the toilet block. This indicated the offender had taken the weapon with him when he left the scene, rather than leaving it behind. This was a significant detail. Around mid-morning, based on the footage obtained from security cameras, together with internal information from the school, police officially identified the man seen in the footage, Paul Thijssen, 24. He was another sports coach at the school who had a close personal relationship with the victim. With both the victim's identity and the identity of the man involved confirmed on the same morning, investigators now had enough grounds to begin reconstructing the full picture of what had happened. Not only what took place inside that toilet, but also the relationship between these two people and what had driven one of them to such a devastating decision. Once both identities had been confirmed, investigators began looking more deeply into the relationship between Lilie James and Paul Thijssen. What they found was not a relationship spanning many years, but one that had only begun a few weeks earlier. The two worked together at the school and had known each other before that. About 5 weeks before the incident, Lilie James and Paul Thijssen began a romantic relationship. But this was a short relationship, lasting only a brief period of time before this tragedy occurred. Just a few days before she died, Lilie James decided to end the relationship. To those around them, this seemed like an ordinary end to a short relationship, the kind that often happens among young people. None of their friends, colleagues, or family members had ever noticed or been aware of any serious issues before that. There had never been an apprehended violence order between the two of them. There was no official report of domestic violence recorded before that point. But investigators, when tracing back through the days after the relationship ended, began to notice something else. Paul Thijssen had not accepted being rejected. Instead, he began using a number of different methods to try to keep the relationship alive. He tracked Lilie James's location through a social media app, checking regularly where she was. He also created a fake account on the same app, using the name of another woman he had once known, so he could keep monitoring Lilie James without being detected. Alongside this, he shared a private photo of Lilie James with his friends, an act seen as a way of asserting control after she had left him. In the final days before she died, Paul Thijssen followed Lilie James in person, in real life, on 7 separate occasions. None of those around them recognized these as signs of escalating, controlling, and coercive behavior. To those who knew Paul Thijssen, he remained a well-liked coach, a high-achieving former student of the school, a young man with a promising career ahead of him. This is exactly what made the case so hard to believe for many people, once it came to light later, that controlling and threatening behavior could exist right alongside a completely ordinary image, one trusted by many, without anyone recognizing how serious it truly was, until it was too late. To better understand what happened inside the gymnasium toilet block that night, investigators had to reconstruct the entire timeline, based on security camera footage and the data collected. On the morning before the incident, Paul Thijssen hired a car. He drove that car to a hardware store, where he picked up several different hammers, weighing them, before choosing one. This was not an impulsive decision. It was a preparation, carried out in a state of complete clarity. He then went to the school, where he was still working as an ordinary sports coach. In the hours before Lilie James returned from water polo training, Paul Thijssen carried out multiple sessions of what would later be described as the killer's rehearsals. He stood in front of several different toilets in the gymnasium area, lunging into each one, with the hammer raised in different hand positions. He was working out the most effective method to carry out the act he had planned in advance. Eventually, he chose one specific toilet, the accessible toilet, located within the gymnasium area. To make sure Lilie James would go into that exact room, he placed a cleaning in progress sign in front of another nearby toilet door. After finishing his setup, he went into a staff break room and waited. He waited for several hours. Around just after 7 p.m., Lilie James returned to the school after finishing her water polo training session with the students. She was in good spirits, smiling, showing no sign of concern at all. Before she walked into the toilet Paul Thijssen had chosen in advance to change out of her swimsuit. Paul Thijssen stood outside that door for about 2 minutes. Then he lunged inside. He did not leave that room for more than an hour afterward. During that time, several text messages were sent from Lilie James's phone to her father, asking him to come and pick her up from the school immediately, without asking any further questions. These were not messages sent by Lilie James. They were sent by Paul Thijssen, who had taken her phone after what had happened inside that room. The entire process, from the moment Paul Thijssen entered the room to the moment he walked out alone, took place only within that small toilet, a space where no one else could see or intervene in what was happening inside. After leaving that toilet, Paul Thijssen did not immediately call the authorities. He also did not seek help from any of the colleagues who were present at the school at that time. Instead, he left the gymnasium area, taking the hammer he had used, along with Lilie James's phone. He drove the car he had hired that morning, moving away from the city center, heading toward a coastal area. Throughout that journey, no authorities were notified of what had happened. It was not until nearly 2 hours after leaving the toilet that Paul Thijssen made a call to 000. In that call, he reported that there was a body at the school that needed to be checked. He did not provide any further details about the person's identity or about how he himself was involved in what had happened. Based on this call, New South Wales police were immediately dispatched to the school. On arrival, officers went into the gymnasium area and made their way to the exact toilet mentioned in the call. There, they found Lilie James's body. The entire area was immediately sealed off and established as an official crime scene. One notable detail was that this 000 call did not come from a passerby who happened to witness something or a security guard patrolling the area. It came from the very person responsible for Lilie James's death, a fact that investigators later had to verify and cross-check very carefully in order to understand the true motive behind this unusual act of reporting. After identifying Paul Thijssen, investigators continued reconstructing his entire movements to strengthen the case file. The murder weapon was identified as a hammer, purchased at a hardware store that same morning, on the day the incident took place. Forensic pathologists confirmed the injuries on Lilie James's body were consistent with this type of weapon. Security camera footage capturing the entire preparation process carried out by Paul Thijssen, from choosing the hammer to rehearsing multiple times in front of different toilets to setting up the misleading sign, was regarded as key evidence, clearly showing the element of premeditation. Alongside this, the fact that Paul Thijssen took Lilie James's phone and used it to send fake messages to her father was also included in the case file as evidence showing he remained fully lucid and deliberate immediately after committing the act. His unusual 000 call, made nearly 2 hours after leaving the scene, was also analyzed closely. For investigators, this was a detail showing there was a period of time during which Paul Thijssen was alone before deciding to contact police, a period during which his motive and psychological state could not be fully established. The history of the relationship between the two of them, including the tracking of her location through social media, the creation of a fake account for surveillance, and the direct following of Lilie James on multiple occasions in the days before, was also compiled to help clarify the motive behind his actions. However, there was one factor that made this case file different from many other cases. The only person who could directly explain everything that had happened inside that toilet was Paul Thijssen himself. And at the point when investigators were compiling this case file, he was still missing after leaving the coastal area where his last known trace had been found. They immediately deployed multiple police teams to continue the search for Paul Thijssen. Expanding into the coastal area where his last known trace had been found. Helicopters and police boats were brought in to search the coastline and the surrounding cliffs. A personal bag, identified as belonging to Paul Thijssen, was found in this area, along with a number of other personal items. However, no trace of his whereabouts was found straight away. It was not until 2 days later that a body was discovered on the rocks below a section of the cliffs by a group of workers who were working nearby. After being recovered, the body was identified as that of a man. The identification process was carried out through fingerprint comparison, with assistance from the Dutch embassy, given that Paul Thijssen held Dutch nationality. The result confirmed this was indeed Paul Thijssen. With the only suspect no longer alive, the case entered a particular legal situation. Under the legal system, a criminal trial cannot be held against a person who has died. No trial was held. No criminal conviction was ever handed down against Paul Thijssen. Instead, in order to establish the full facts of what had happened, as well as to identify any lessons that could be learned from this case, authorities decided to hold a different kind of inquiry, a coronial inquest, aimed at determining the cause, circumstances, and sequence of events leading to the deaths of both Lilie James and Paul Thijssen. This was the only path left for Lilie James's family, along with the public, to be able to fully understand what had truly happened. The coronial inquest into the deaths of Lilie James and Paul Thijssen only formally began more than a year after the incident took place. This was a period of time needed to complete the full body of evidence, testimony, and technical data related to the case. The hearing ran over several days, with the participation of a number of different experts. Experts in gender-based violence were brought in to analyze the actions Paul Thijssen had carried out against Lilie James in the days before she died. They pointed out that tracking her location, creating a fake account for surveillance, and sharing her private image with others were all behaviors that constituted coercive control, a form of violence that leaves no physical trace, but can escalate to a dangerous level. The inquest also heard about Paul Thijssen's previous relationship, in which he had also shown tracking and controlling behavior toward a former girlfriend. This was a detail showing that this was not the first time he had displayed controlling behavior toward a woman in his life. A significant part of this inquest focused on the role of technology in the case. Paul Thijssen's use of a location-sharing feature on a social media app to track Lilie James was seen as a clear example of a pattern that is becoming increasingly common in young people's relationships. Evidence was found showing a large volume of exchanges between the two of them, carried out through an app where messages automatically disappear after being read. This meant the record of their relationship remained incomplete, and much of what became known was based only on accounts from people around them or on images and messages that Paul Thijssen had kept saved in his own account. At the end of the hearing, the person presiding over the inquest delivered her findings. The case ended without a single trial ever being held. Under Australian law, a person who has died cannot be criminally prosecuted. Paul Thijssen died before he was arrested, before he was formally charged, and before he ever had to stand before any court. That meant Lilie James's family would never sit in a courtroom, hear a jury deliver a verdict, or witness a sentence being read out in public. That was not injustice within the system. That was the limit of it. But that limit still left a very real gap for those left behind. Lilie James's parents lost their 21-year-old daughter on an ordinary Wednesday evening, and from then on, no legal mechanism could give them back the one thing they truly needed: an official answer, recorded by the state, that what happened to their daughter was a crime. The only thing left was the coronial inquest opened in March 2025. Not to punish anyone, but to establish what truly happened, why it happened, and whether anything could have been done differently. This inquest, although it did not carry the weight of a criminal trial, achieved one important thing. It gave an accurate name to what had taken place. Paul Thijssen's actions, tracking her location, creating a fake account for surveillance, sharing a private image without consent, and following Lilie James in person 7 times in her final days, were confirmed by experts to be coercive control, a category of behaviour recognized as a precursor to more serious violence. This was not ordinary jealousy, nor was it someone simply grieving a failed relationship. This was a named pattern of behaviour, with a recognizable structure, and importantly, one that could be identified if the people around him knew what to look for. The findings of the coronial inquest confirmed Lilie James's death occurred in the context of domestic and family violence and gender-based violence. This was a calculated and premeditated act, not a sudden moment of lost control. And that, while it could not change the outcome, did change the way many people came to understand what had happened. After the coronial inquest concluded, what Australian society received was not a verdict, but a conversation that should have started long before this. Lilie James's case raised bigger questions about how society views violence within intimate relationships, particularly the kind of violence that leaves no physical injury, no police record, no apprehended violence order ever put in place. The kind of violence that begins with actions outsiders might easily explain away with words like being overly caring or finding it hard to let go. The experts who took part in the inquest pointed out that in many young people's relationships today, technology is creating new tools for control, tools no one can see, no one can measure, but which have a very real impact on the person being targeted. Real-time location sharing features on social media apps, originally created for the purpose of connection, can become surveillance tools in the hands of someone intent on controlling another person. This was a specific lesson that Lilie James's case left behind. Alongside this, one important detail was also raised during the inquest. Paul Thijssen was not the first time he had shown controlling behaviour in a relationship. His former girlfriend had also been the target of similar behaviour. This raised a question that is not easy to answer. If someone had recognized and reported that behavior sooner, would Lilie James still be here? No one can know for certain. But that question still needs to be asked, not to place blame on anyone, but to better understand what could be done differently in the future. Lilie James is remembered by those who loved her, not for the way she died, but for the way she lived. Someone who arrived earliest at the pool every morning and left last. Someone who remembered the name of every student on her water polo team. Someone who, according to her closest friends, made any room she walked into feel a little lighter. Her funeral was held on 17 November 2023 at her former school, Danebank, in Hurstville. Those who came to farewell her were not only close family and friends. There were young children from the water polo team she coached, children not yet old enough to fully understand what had happened, but old enough to know that the person who smiled at them every afternoon at the pool would not be there again. No trial, no conviction, not a single moment where justice was declared officially. Paul Thijssen died before the legal system could ever lay a hand on him. And Lilie James, the only person who truly suffered through all of it, can no longer say anything at all. So, in your view, was that fair? Could a coronial inquest, no matter how thorough, ever replace a real trial, one where the victim's family has the right to stand before justice and hear a clear verdict? Or is there something about this case that still leaves you uneasy? About the system, about people, or about the signs that someone should have seen sooner? Leave your thoughts in the comments. There are some cases that, after reading them, leave people feeling angry. There are also cases that leave listeners feeling heartbroken and sad. And there are cases, like Lilie James's case, that leave people sitting in silence for a while, not knowing where to even begin. Because nothing in this story happened suddenly. Everything had signs, everything had precedent, and everything unfolded step by step, slowly, in plain view of those around, without anyone recognizing it. That is the most frightening part of this story. Not the weapon, not the cruelty of the plan, but the false sense of normalcy that covered everything right up until the very last moment. Paul Thijssen was not some stranger who suddenly appeared. He was someone familiar, a colleague, and someone the school had trusted with the care of its students. And in the eyes of most people who knew him, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, until there was nothing left to stop him. The first lesson from this case is not some grand warning or a catchy slogan. It is smaller than that, more specific than that. It lies in this: controlling behavior within a romantic relationship rarely begins with violence. It often begins with things outsiders describe as "he cares about her so much," or "he just cannot let go." Tracking her location, checking her phone, showing up in places he was not invited, sharing private images as a way of asserting that the other person still belongs to him. These behaviors have a name, and that name is not love. The second lesson lies in the role of technology. Location sharing apps, self-deleting messages, anonymous accounts. These are all neutral tools by nature, but in the hands of someone intent on control, they become invisible threads, leaving no trace, seen by no one. This is especially dangerous for young people, where the line between closeness and surveillance can blur without anyone noticing. And the third lesson, perhaps the hardest to say, is about the gap between outward appearance and what is truly happening inside a relationship. Paul Thijssen, in the eyes of colleagues and students, was an ordinary person, well-liked, trusted, no criminal record, no formal warning on file. But his former girlfriend had experienced similar behavior before, and that was never recorded anywhere, never reported to anyone, and never recognized as a sign worth paying attention to. If it had been recognized, no one can say for certain what might have been different. Those questions remain. Lilie James was 21. She was studying at university. She was coaching the water polo team she loved. She was living a life that, by every ordinary measure, still had so much ahead of it. And all of that was taken away, not in a single moment of lost control, but through a plan calculated step by step, by a man who had decided her rejection of him was something he could not accept. This is not a story about love gone wrong. This is a story about the need for control, and the price paid by the person who had no control at all, when the other person decided to take it back by any means necessary.